Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
The good news is tax cuts. The bad news? America's rising debt. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Peter G. Peterson Foundation reported this following a survey in April of 2025. So keep that in mind because it's only gotten worse, right? The national debt has only grown. But the headline is this. U.S. voters sound alarm on budget bill that adds $29 trillion to national debt. Deep concerns across party lines about inflation and interest rates. And then the sub headline goes 9 in 10 voters, 90% of voters say current market uncertainty and economic turmoil increases worries about national debt. Well, duh. If the question was, do you think economic turmoil increases worry about national debt? I would say that 100%, 10 in 10 voters might say that. But anyhow, I'm not reading from the actual survey, so I don't know how the question is. But the idea, the premise, the general theme here is that Americans across all party lines, across both party lines, across all political ideologies, have concerns about the rising debt, and with good reason. And before I get into more of that, I would like to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, where, if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, The Best of Cheryl Chumley, how come? Check it out. I'd love to have you sign up for it. All you have to do is enter your email address, and then you'll get delivered to your email box Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays my newsletter containing my commentaries that I write at the Washington Times, as well as my Bold and Blunts, my audio versions and my video versions, which usually come out Friday, Saturday, something like that. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. Washington Times really does appreciate the support of readers, listeners, and watchers to our news products, which are really the best in the business. More broadly, according to the U.S. Fiscal Confidence Index, I'm reading from this Peterson, what is it again? Let me scroll up. Peter G. Peterson Foundation, 2025. More broadly, according to the April U.S. Fiscal Confidence Index, that sounds official, 76% of voters are urging the president and Congress to spend more time addressing the national debt. See, 76%. When can you get 76% of America to agree on anything, right? I mean, you're crossing party lines with that one. Even Democrats are on board with at least talking about lowering the national debt. And I want to be careful here. Normally, and if you're a regular listener to Bold and Blunt, you know this already. Normally, I don't shy from criticizing Democrats, which are really socialists and the party of Marxists and communists nowadays. They're just a batch of anti-America collectivists in my mind. But when it comes to debt, when it comes to spending, specifically when it comes to lowering spending, Republicans are falling down on that job just as much as Democrats. Democrats like to spend on social welfare programs because in that way they buy their votes, right? They like Zoran Mamdani in New York City. He won his way to the mayor's seat by promising free daycare, free housing, free groceries, free. So that's how Democrats grow the debt. Republicans do it for national security reasons, defense spending, but they also have been falling down in some respects on holding businesses accountable for hiring cheap labor, which sort of plays into the national debt if you think about it. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but Republicans have their own ways of justifying the need for more spending, more spending, more spending. But, it's always spending of yours and my dollars, right? It's rarely politicians reaching into their own pocketbook and saying, hey, I'll spend too. I'll take care of this. I don't want to call on the taxpayers to pay for it. It's really easy to spend other people's money. So 76% of voters urging the president and Congress spend more time addressing the national debt. Talk is great, but how about some action? That's the problem. Politicians love to talk and express concerns, and they're so anxious, and they're so anxious they're going to attack the other side about it. And so you've got this bickering that crosses party lines. Republicans blame Democrats, Democrats blame Republicans. But look, on debt, it's both parties almost equally, I would say. I'm just more in favor of what Republicans spend tax dollars on than I am Democrats. All right, back to this foundation piece. Also, 75% of voters agree that addressing the debt needs to be a top 3 priority for the president and Congress, including 73% of Democrats and 89% of Republicans. The Fiscal Confidence Index measures public opinion about the national debt by asking 6 questions in 3 key areas. First, level of concern about the direction of the national debt. Second, priority, how high a priority politicians should regard address of the national debt. And finally, expectations. Expectations about whether debt will get better or worse in the next few years. All right, let's address expectations. Honestly, debt's just going to skyrocket because this is the trend in America. And it's not just the national government trend, it's household trend too. Used to be live within your means. That used to be pretty much a guiding principle of most American families, because it really stems from the Bible. It stems from Judeo-Christian teachings that debt enslaves, that if you owe and you spend your life working to pay off debt and you have little left over at the end of the pay period, then you are living above your means, and then you're getting into things like pride, or you're getting into things like sloth, or moral issues about why that's taking place. Of course, there are some people who are spending above their means due to unforeseen circumstances, no fault of their own, a death in the family, or a tragedy that's taken place, their homes burned down, things like that. But by and large, it used to be a basic guiding principle of Judeo-Christian principles in America's roots, that families would live within their means by and large. Now, you put everything on a credit card, everything. I remember the time when fast food restaurants and other establishments wouldn't even accept credit or debit cards. You had to pay in cash because the amounts were so low. The general idea was, who's going to put a Happy Meal on a credit card? Nobody's stupid enough to go into debt for a Happy Meal. And then they started taking cards because Americans started using their cards for everything, not just credit cards, but debit cards too. But this is how quickly a shift takes place. And as we look forward and going into digital currency and cashless payments and chips inserted in a hand, so you just wave your hand over a chip reader and it takes money directly out of your bank. So you never even handle actual money. You never even feel physical cash in your hand. So all your transactions just become like a quick afterthought. You don't feel the money in your hand, so it doesn't feel real to you. And therefore, the debt that you're incurring doesn't feel real to you either. And that's the problem moving into a cashless society. And so when we're talking about the national debt, it's not just, there's some sort of ghost-like figure of federal authorities spending. It trickles down into the American home. The spending in this nation, the desire to spend more than is possessed, is something that starts from the ground up, and it shows itself, it manifests in a tolerance for the government to spend without having the money in the bank. And I have a guest with me today who is going to speak more on this. She is an expert in taxes and tariffs and economic policy and all things money. And I'm very happy to say she's here on Bold and Blunt to discuss. Dr. Ann Bradley with the Fund for American Studies, a great group. I am so happy to have you on Bold and Blunt. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Let's talk about taxes and tariffs and the economy and all those things that you are expertise in. We just passed tax day, and this White House administration is taking credit for an average of upwards of $3,000 for returns to the American citizens. First off, is that number correct? And second off, can this administration properly take credit for that?
Well, those are good questions. I actually don't know if that number is correct. I think we'll see. I do think that some tax reductions have gone through. And I think, look, I would say, as Milton Friedman would say, and have said many times, that is a wonderful thing because it returns money back to households and it returns money back into the economy. And the economy is really how we grow wealth. And so, I think it's a good thing. But the caveat that I would say here is that unless we reduce spending, then I think that the tax decreases, while beneficial to Americans right now and what we want, I think that in the long run, the spending is going to catch up with us. And so the tax returns get swamped by the spending that accumulates debt that falls on the American people. So this is what I worry about in the long run.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought that up because that really is the crucial part of the equation here. And it seems too often that politicians talk about tax cuts as political gifts, right? Campaign season comes along and they want to cut taxes, but in the meanwhile, the spending is skyrocketing, and not just under Democrats, Republicans too.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the concern, is that we've really seen this for the past 100 years, this trend of increasing government spending at a very kind of bipartisan, in a bipartisan way. And so I think the problem is that we don't have a consensus about what to do, nor do we have a politically salient will to do it. And until we get there, I don't think we're going to solve this problem. I will say, though, it is solvable. So I don't think anybody should despair and give up hope, because when we have that attitude, we really kind of just stick our head in the sand and say, forget about it. And I don't think we should do that. I think this is a solvable problem. And in my view, and I could be wrong, I think the way you solve this problem is to really, you're going to see programs that have cuts and that become unfunded in the long run. So when we think about our unfunded liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, these are the biggest problems that are becoming insolvent soon. And so I think, the hope is that while that is terrible, and we don't want people to, kind of get put into a short-term position where they don't have the ability to get the health care that they need, or the retirement benefits are less than what they budgeted for them to be, that type of thing. I think that is going to force us to really rethink these programs, and we will have a golden opportunity to do so. But outside of really being forced into a corner, it doesn't seem, again, that there's a politically salient desire to do something about it. You hear people complain about it, but when it comes to voting, I think people vote for the benefits that they want to have. And I think that's a real problem for our country going forward. I think that there's reasonable ways that candidates out there are talking, on the margin, how can we cut things? How can we become more efficient? How can we get better? I think we've seen this administration try to do that. But I think we need to do that in a durable way and in a sustainable way. So again, what we're really doing is freeing up the economy. And when the economy grows, that's how Americans get richer. That's how they can provide for their families. That's how they can, invest in their futures.
So you spoke of political will, and I think that hits the nail right on the head. But there are a couple of factors that have made it very easy for politicians to sidestep their political duties to the American people when it comes time to fiduciary responsibility. When we got off the gold standard, some people say that that's when the fiat money and fabricated money really soared. And then when you look to the future and digital currencies, it seems like the problem is only going to get worse.
Yeah, that's also possible. I have a lot of optimism about digital currencies, but not when they're in the hands of the state, because a digital currency promulgated by the state is just another fiat currency, in my opinion. And so I think that maybe that's what you're getting to, is we're seeing governments kind of increasingly want to get in on this. And the reason that digital currencies have had some really kind of good opportunities previously is because there's limits on what the currency can do. It's less able to be manipulated, and that's exactly what we're looking for in a currency that can be easily manipulated by the government will be. And that's not just true for the United States. We see that across countries. So when we think about, I'm really focused on economic freedom. We've been measuring economic freedom across different countries for 50 years now. And one of the things we look at is the behavior of the central bank and the ability to keep the currency out of the hands of political leaders who just want to be reckless with it. Because this is, that type of inflation is devastating. And I think the people that it hurts the most are people at the lower end of the income distribution. It certainly hurts everyone, but it's a kind of regressive policy that harms people. So, I agree with your inclination here, which is that, I think a digital currency in the hands of the state is simply another form of fiat currency that will be used to fund the state. And that will seem really great in the short run. But in the long run, there's just, the bills always come due. And if we kind of deflate our currency over time, then that also harms everyone. And so there's no free lunch. This is what we talk about in economics. And I think when we get into the political sector, we act as if there are many free lunches for the taking. But, in the long run, we always pay for this.
So you must have a lot to say about Zoran Mamdani and his economic policies so far as mayor of New York.
I do. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few things. Here's what I'll say. Instead of just attacking him, I think we have to, he's a politician who wants power. There's just nothing new about that or even really that interesting about it. I think what we need to focus on is the young New Yorkers who think that he provides a vision for the future that will help the middle class and the lower income groups of people, because that's why he is popular. And I think and I think about it this way, I imagine, okay, you're 25, you might have $250,000 of debt from your undergraduate education. You get a great job in New York City. Maybe it pays you $80,000, maybe it pays you $100,000. But if you have that much debt and you're just starting out, you're living with 3 roommates or something in 700 square feet. And this guy is like, we're going to do free grocery stores. And when you want to have kids, we're going to give you free daycare. And, we're going to give you free buses. And I think it sounds easy. It sounds great. And if I was that 25-year-old, I might think, okay, he's trying to help me. He sees what my problems are. And so I think that's a very effective strategy for a policy, for a politician, is to connect with people's felt needs and what their worries are. The problem is this always fails. We know it fails. It fails every time it's tried. It's not just, oh, he's young and hip and charismatic, so he gets it in a way that no one else has gotten it before. It's kind of like well, if you just let me try socialism, I'll do it right this time. And I just think that that's going to fail because, again, there's no free lunch. There's no free grocery stores. I saw some little headline the other day that said that basically for the price of 5 grocery stores that he wants to create, one in each borough, Aldi, the grocery, is a very small kind of grocery store. It's not like a Walmart or something, but fits beautifully into the New York City kind of landscape. They could make 25 to 30 Aldis for the price tag of kind of 5. And his first isn't going to open until 2029. So people should look at that and say, that's strange. Why does it take so long? Why does it cost so much money? And in the other cities where this is has been attempted, it has failed. They close because there's no free lunch, even just, how desperately we want there to be one. And so I think we need to find a way to talk to up-and-coming generations who are going to be future leaders. They're going to be governors. They're going to be policymakers. They're going to do all sorts of things. And I think we need to appeal to their felt needs, but give them a more, not just, optimism, but not blindly follow us, but really say, this is not going to work and it's going to hurt you. It's going to actually hurt the people it's attempting to help. And so I think we need to connect better with that generation and talk to them about how economic freedom, like I mentioned before, is the way. And that cities and states and countries that adopt, those institutions do far better. We see more income mobility. We see more income in general. We see more opportunities. And so I think we need to provide a vision for an opportunity society. I don't think we need to provide a vision for free stuff, because that just always kind of fails despite how attractive it is.
So one of the selling points of socialists is that they successfully ratchet up envy. They pit one class against another. But how do you feel about a flat tax? Because wouldn't that be much more transparent, not to mention much easier when you go to file taxes? But that would take away the socialist power in pitting classes against each other, wouldn't it?
I think that's right. I mean, I think it also kind of forces the hand of the governments, whether you're talking about, you could implement this, at the city level, you could implement this at the federal level. And it really forces the state to reconcile itself with the real revenue. So I think that this is, but that's not kind of your question. Your question is, does this help us address the envy issue, which I think politicians act, especially on the kind of socialist or progressive left, love to play the envy card. Because again, it sounds like, okay, Jeff Bezos or some guy like this, he has so much money, Elon Musk, they can't possibly use it all. And if your view is that the economy is a pie and it's a zero-sum game, then you are very worried about billionaires, because the envy plays right into that. It's like, well, the billionaires must be stealing. The pie is fixed, and the more they get, the less I get. When in reality, entrepreneurs like, kind of Amazon, Walmart, all these things that we see in society in a country like the United States, they have provided immense social value, far outweighing what's in their net worth. And I think that is another thing that gets grossly misunderstood. And so again, kind of on the left, the push is the rich are bad because they're taking what's yours, instead of the rich are amazing when they're using their human capital to make contributions to the common good, such that an ordinary person can order from Amazon and have, like dental floss and toothpaste, whatever they need, dropped off on their doorstep in 48 hours. That's remarkable. I mean, he only got wealthy because we allowed him to, because he's using his human capital to serve us. That's a harder, kind of thing to buy politically than just, the billionaires have a lot, let's take it from them and let's, redistribute the wealth. And I think envy is intellectually lazy. And so it's just like, we don't have to think about it. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let's just tax the billionaires. But This also doesn't work. We're seeing states now that are adopting the wealth tax for kind of wealthy people. Usually it's over $1
Yes.
million. And what happens? They move. You just see capital flight. So you're not dealing with you're not fixing envy. You're just like, the rich people are like, okay, I'm going to leave. It's easy for me to leave, and I'm going to go somewhere with a more attractive tax code. And that's what they do. Not everybody leaves, but look, here's the problem with that. When you get capital flight like that, then to finance those state activities, they actually have to move the goalposts on what it means to be wealthy. And so it also ends up being regressive. So I just think that this does all the wrong things. And I think Mamdani is going to have to reconcile himself with that if he gets what he wants, right? Because if he provides all this stuff that's free, we know it's not free. Someone has to pay. The rich are going to have to pay. He's marketed as, oh, I'm only asking him for 1 or 2%. But when you add on all the things he wants to do, which is real estate and all these types of things, they're going to leave. And again, I think that's going to hurt New Yorkers, because unless New York deals with its budget, it has this kind of ongoing problem. And that's kind of back to where we started, right? This is true at the federal level. The United States does not have a revenue problem when we're talking about taxes. They have a spending problem.
Right.
And I think that the states that are seeing all this migration and all of these problems, that's what they have to deal with. But again, politically, it's kind of challenging to do this, because when you have this guy saying, well, I'll give you free stuff, don't worry, that's kind of easy to set, to latch onto.
So I know we only don't have much time left, but I had two other issues I wanted to quickly ask. So just carrying on with the flat tax discussion, by the numbers, does a flat tax benefit America if that were to be imposed nationwide? And second off, you speak of economic freedom, and that's what you advocate for. So you must have a view of tariffs that's slightly negative, I'm guessing. Could you just talk to briefly those two subjects?
Of course. I think the flat tax benefits America in the sense that it makes the tax code far less complicated. It's going to put a lot of CPAs out of business. They have to find something different to do. But that frees up money in the economy to do wonderful things. So I think it does, but again, I think only if that can be reconciled against spending. So that's what I'll say about that. So I think it's a much cleaner system, right? But you can't just do that and walk away. I think the flat tax is only going to work if whatever numbers that yields has to be reconciled against our spending. And again, that's where I worry. But yes, I would be in favor of that. But if we're going to do a flat tax and that's going to prompt the government to get into more debt, I don't think that's not really helping us. So you kind of help one side of the problem, not the other. Gotcha. As for economic freedom and tariffs, tariffs are a tax. If you like tariffs, you don't like that message. But that's just very simple. I mean, that's what they do, right? That's their whole kind of reason for existence. So you have a good that's crossed over the border and you tax it. Historically, the United States has been kind of a beacon for free trade and freedom in general. This goes back to the founders' ideas. It's certainly, you see it in Adam Smith and others. So there's just a long intellectual history in economics and political economy for this idea, but also just in the kind of the United States and the founding, what the founders believed was going to generate the wealth of the nation was going to be free trade internally among the states, but also kind of free trade with the world. We live in a different world now. It's much more globalized. That's a great thing. And so I think tariffs, to the extent that, what happened last year was just a really big pivot from our historical tariff policy. It was, kind of something like 2.5% average weighted tariffs. And then it was in the, kind of upper, kind of teens and 20s%. And so that's a big departure. It was kind of universal, although there were different exceptions and, different kind of countries like China, we had different policies. So I think it might be, kind of reasonable to say, okay, maybe we don't want to do some of the trade that we had been doing with China. Still, the question to me is, are aggressive tariffs the way to accomplish that, especially when we're not just aggressively using the tariff against China, but everywhere? And so, I think there's a lot of reasons that are given for tariffs. They're going to bring jobs back. They're going to narrow the budget deficit. They're going to eliminate the trade deficit. They're going to get countries to do what we want them to do. So there's this kind of statecraft element, and then there's kind of the fentanyl crisis. So there's just many, many reasons given for the tariffs. And I would ask people to ask this question. We know they're a tax. We know they can raise revenue. That's what they've always done. But, if they were such a silver bullet and they could do all those things, then why wouldn't we have pursued very aggressive tariffs universally for hundreds of years? And the reason is they don't do all those things. We love silver bullets. We like this idea this is like one thing that can solve our problems. And I think not only do they not solve the problems, but they've actually created some pretty damaging unintended consequences. The biggest one I'll say is that they tax American consumers and American producers. So they hurt employment, they hurt production, they hurt households. The tax foundation estimates about $2,000 was the average cost to the American household last year. But also look at what's going on with China and Canada. So China and Canada have a more favorable relationship with each other because they say, okay, the United States cannot be trusted to be a free trade partner. So it's one thing to say, okay, maybe we want to kind of decouple a little bit from China. And if you would agree that that was a good thing, I don't know if it is, but like if you said that's my goal, certainly what you don't want to happen is China and Canada to say, well we're going to kind of forge this new relationship, especially since Canada's our neighbor. I mean, it just makes a lot of sense to have free trade, cooperative relationships with your geographical neighbors. So this is like kind of some crazy stuff that I think is predictable. We could have predicted this would happen and we would want to avoid it, but here we are. So I think this has been kind of a big mistake is probably the nicest way to put it, with lots of consequences that economists, if they were invited to this conversation, I think would have said, maybe we should not do it this way.
You're going to have to come back on, maybe on my video version of Bold and Blunt, and we can have a deeper conversation about the global economy, because I think that's where tariffs get complicated too.
Yeah, I'd love to.
What a fun chat. Thank you. Dr. Ian Bradley, the Fund for American Studies. I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. Thanks for your expertise.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
You too. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.